Janitor stuns by speaking Arabic to Sheikh and silences even the executives. Tamika Johnson never imagined that an ordinary workday at the company where she had been cleaning for 3 years would completely change the course of her life. The sound of furious shouting coming from the 20th floor conference room made her pause while wiping down the hallway. It was a man speaking Arabic, clearly angry, while the American executives remained in awkward silence. Tamika immediately recognized the language and the tone of outrage in the foreigner's voice. Without hesitation, she pushed open the slightly ajar door and stepped inside. "Excuse the interruption," she said in flawless Arabic, making everyone turn in surprise. "Can I help resolve this misunderstanding?" Sheikh Farid Al-Mansour stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening in shock. The 5 company executives gaped as the blue-uniformed janitor addressed the Arabic investor in his own language. You speak Arabic?" Farid asked, still disbelieving. "Yes, sir, and from what I understood, you're concerned about the numbers in the quarterly report. Is that correct?" Farid studied the woman's face for a few seconds before answering. "Not just concerned, I'm furious. These numbers don't match what was agreed upon in the investment contract." Tamika quickly translated for the executives, who exchanged nervous glances. The CEO, Richard Owens, tried to regain control of the situation. "Tamika, you need to return to your work. This is a private meeting." "One moment," Farid interrupted in broken English. "She stays. You leave." "But Mr. Al-Mansour, we need to discuss the contract details," protested Richard. "Out!" Farid shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Everyone leaves. Only she stays." The executives exchanged uncomfortable looks, but had no choice. Farid Al-Mansour owned 60% of the company's shares, and his decision-making power was absolute. One by one they filed out, leaving Tamika alone with the sheikh. "How did you learn Arabic?" Farid asked as soon as the door closed. "And not just any Arabic. You speak with the Najdi dialect. Where does this knowledge come from?" Tamika lowered her gaze, her hands gripping the broom handle. "I worked in the Middle East for a few years," she replied in Arabic, avoiding details. "Doing what?" "I'd rather not talk about the past, Mr. Al-Mansour." Farid stepped closer, intrigued. "You're no ordinary janitor. Your pronunciation is perfect, your grammar impeccable. You were a teacher, weren't you?" Tamika felt a lump in her throat. It had been 7 years since anyone had called her a teacher. "That doesn't matter anymore. Now I clean offices and I need to get back to work before I'm fired." "Wait," Farid said, placing a hand on her arm. "I need an interpreter during my stay in the United States. Someone I can trust. I'll pay $5,000 a week." Tamika's eyes widened. $5,000 was more than she made in 3 months as a janitor. I can't. I have my job here. I'll speak to your supervisors. You'll be released to accompany me to meetings." Before Tamika could respond, the door swung open abruptly. Shirley, the cleaning supervisor, stormed in, her face red with anger. "Tamika, what are you doing here? You abandoned your entire floor to stand around chatting." "Shirley, I can explain." "No explanation. You're fired." Farid rose from his chair. "This woman works for me starting today. Speak to HR." Shirley looked at the sheikh, then at Tamika, clearly bewildered. "Sir, with all due respect, she's just a janitor. There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," Farid replied firmly, "and I suggest you treat my employee with more respect." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Shirley stormed out of the room, but not before shooting Tamika a look of pure hatred. Farid turned his attention to her. "So, do you accept my offer?" Tamika thought of her teenage daughter at home, the overdue bills, the eviction notice that had arrived last week. She had no choice. "I accept, Mr. Al-Mansour." "Excellent. We start tomorrow at 8 in the morning, and please just call me Farid." That night, Tamika arrived at her small 2-room apartment in the projects of New York City. Her 17-year-old daughter, Jasmine, was studying at the kitchen table. "Mom, what's with that face? Did something happen at work?" Tamika told her about the meeting with Farid and the job offer. Jasmine was silent for a moment before responding. "Mom, are you sure this is a good idea? What if it's some kind of scam?" Jasmine, we don't have a choice. The landlord came by again today. If we don't pay the rent by Friday, we'll be evicted. Jasmine sighed. She knew about the family's financial struggles ever since her father had left them 5 years ago. And you think you can trust this man? I don't know, but it's the only chance we have right now. The next morning, Tamika showed up at the office wearing her best outfit, a white blouse and a black skirt she saved for special occasions. Farid was waiting for her at reception. Good morning, Tamika. Ready for your first day? Yes, Mr. Farid. They went up to the conference room where the directors were already waiting with scowls on their faces. Richard Owens didn't hide his irritation. Mr. Al-Mansour, I still don't understand why we need an interpreter for a meeting in English. Because I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're saying, Farid replied curtly. Tamika, please translate everything said here. For the next 3 hours, Tamika translated numbers, explanations, and justifications. Gradually, she noticed inconsistencies in the reports presented by the directors. Sometimes, she had to ask for clarification on data that didn't make sense. Ask them why marketing expenses increased by 400% last quarter, but revenue dropped, Farid requested. When Tamika asked the question, she noticed Richard and the CFO, Michael Williams, exchange nervous glances. It was a long-term strategy, Michael stammered. Sometimes you have to invest more to reap rewards later. Farid didn't seem convinced by the translated answer. In the following days, Tamika accompanied Farid to other meetings with suppliers, clients, and smaller investors. Her presence raised eyebrows everywhere. Snide remarks reached her ears. Look at that. The janitor turned executive overnight, one secretary whispered. She must be doing more than just translating Arabic, another replied with a sly grin. Tamika tried to ignore it, but the words stung. Farid seemed oblivious to her discomfort, focused solely on understanding the company's business. During a particularly tense meeting about exports, Farid got an urgent call and had to step out. Tamika was left alone with the 3 directors. Listen here, Richard said, stepping closer to her. I don't know what game you're playing, but it won't last long. I'm not playing any games, I'm just doing my job. Your job? Michael laughed. You're a janitor who happens to speak Arabic. Don't forget your place. My place is wherever I can work with dignity to support my daughter, Tamika replied firmly. Your daughter? Asked the 3rd director, Brandon Miller. How old is she? Something in the tone of the question made Tamika uncomfortable. Why do you want to know? Just curiosity. A teenager, right? Pretty like her mother. Tamika felt a chill down her spine. I won't discuss my family with you. Farid walked back into the room at that moment, ending the conversation. But Tamika noticed the glances the directors exchanged. That afternoon, while organizing papers for Farid, Tamika accidentally came across an Arabic document left open in a folder. It was a confidential report from an external auditing firm. As she read it, her blood ran cold. The report indicated suspicions of financial fraud in the American branch. Millions of dollars had been diverted through fake contracts with shell companies. And the worst part, there was a set date for the permanent closure of the American branch. All employees would be fired in 2 weeks. Tamika froze. Hundreds of people would lose their jobs, including the cleaners she worked with. And Farid already knew everything. Is something wrong, Tamika? Farid asked as he entered the room. She quickly closed the folder. No, nothing's wrong. Are you sure? You look pale. Tamika hesitated. Should she admit she'd read the report? Should she warn her co-workers about the layoffs? But if she did, she'd lose the best-paying job she'd ever had. I'm fine, just a little tired. Farid studied her for a moment. How about we leave early today? Tomorrow we have an important meeting with the minority shareholders. On her way home, Tamika couldn't stop thinking about what she'd discovered. She arrived at the apartment and found Jasmine crying in the kitchen. What's wrong, honey? Mom, we got another notice. If we don't pay the rent by tomorrow, we'll be evicted for real. Tamika sat beside her daughter and hugged her. Don't worry, tomorrow I get paid for the first week. Everything will work out. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you never talk about the time you spent outside the US? About your work as a teacher? Tamika sighed deeply. Some things from the past are better left buried, sweetheart. But you were a college professor, weren't you? Of Arabic and literature? How do you know that? I found your diplomas hidden at the back of the closet when I was looking for a blouse. Mom, you have a PhD. Why are you working as a cleaner? Tamika closed her eyes, feeling the weight of years of silence. Because sometimes life forces us to start over, Jasmine. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have. But what happened? Why won't you ever tell me? Maybe one day I will, but not today. The next morning, Tamika arrived at the office determined to keep the report a secret. She needed the job and couldn't afford to take the moral high ground when her daughter depended on her. The meeting with the minority shareholders began at 9 a.m. They were small American investors who had bought shares in the company in recent years. Fareed explained he wanted to hear their concerns about the future of the business. Mr. Al-Mansour, said one of the shareholders, an elderly man with grey hair named Thomas Robinson. There are rumors the company is facing financial difficulties. Is that true? Fareed looked at Tamika, who translated the question. He answered in Arabic. Tell them we're evaluating all options to ensure the company's financial health. Tamika hesitated. The answer was evasive and technically true, but it hid the reality of the imminent closure. He said, the company is being evaluated to ensure its financial health, she translated, her stomach in knots. What about the jobs? Asked an elderly woman. My son has worked here for 15 years. Is he safe? Again, Fareed answered vaguely in Arabic, and Tamika found herself forced to translate a half-truth. After the meeting, Fareed seemed satisfied. You did very well, Tamika. Your translation was perfect. Fareed, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you really believe the company can recover? Fareed looked at her for a long moment. Why do you ask? Just professional curiosity. Tamika, in business, sometimes we have to make tough decisions. We can't always save everything. She understood the message. Fareed wasn't going to change his mind about closing the branch. That afternoon, while waiting for Fareed to finish a call, Tamika went down to the floor where she used to work as a cleaner. Her former co-workers greeted her coldly. Well, look who showed up, Shirley said sarcastically. The new executive. Shirley, I came to warn you all about what? That now you're too important to talk to us? That's not it. Listen, you all need to... Tamika, a voice called behind her. It was Fareed. I've been looking for you. We have another meeting. The cleaners quickly stepped back, whispering among themselves. Tamika didn't get to finish what she wanted to say. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. For the rest of the week, Tamika felt increasingly torn between loyalty to her former co-workers and the need to keep her well-paying job. Fareed was a respectful and fair boss to her, but she knew hundreds of people would lose their jobs because of his decisions. On Friday, she received her first week's pay, $5,000 as promised. It was more money than she'd seen in years. She rushed to pay the overdue rent before the landlord followed through on his eviction threat. Mom, I'm so glad you managed it, Jasmine said when she got home. Now we can relax for a while. Yeah, sweetheart. For now, at least. But the peace didn't last long. On Sunday, Jasmine came home crying after hanging out with her friends. What happened, honey? People are saying horrible things about you in the neighborhood, Mom. They say that you're involved with that Arabic man for money. Tamika felt a wave of anger and sadness. And do you believe them? Of course not. But it hurts to hear those things. And there's more. What else? One of my friends said her dad, who works at the company, overheard the directors saying you're an industrial spy, that you're stealing company secrets to pass them to the Arabic competitor. Tamika sighed. The rumors were getting more and more absurd. Jasmine, you know none of that is true. I'm just working as an interpreter. I know, Mom, but sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't be better for you to go back to being a cleaner. At least no one spoke badly about you then. Honey, I can't go back. They fired me, remember? And besides, with this salary, I can give you a better life. You can focus on your studies without worrying if we'll have enough to eat at the end of the month. Jasmine hugged her mother. I know, Mum. I know you're doing all this for me. It's just hard to see you being judged unfairly again. Again, Jasmine realized what she'd said. Mum, I know something bad happened to you in the past, something that forced you to leave college and become a cleaner. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I know you were wronged before. And I'm afraid it'll happen again. Tamika felt her eyes fill with tears. Her daughter was more perceptive than she'd realized. Jasmine, some things in life are too complicated to explain, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure this time is different. On Monday, Farid seemed tenser than usual. He asked Tamika to accompany him to a meeting at a law firm in downtown New York City. What are we going to do there? She asked in the car. Sign some documents, nothing major. But when they arrived at the office, Tamika realized it wasn't nothing major. The lawyers presented stacks of documents about closing the American branch and laying off all the employees. Mr. Al-Mansour, said the lead attorney, these are the documents for the official dissolution of the company. Once signed, you'll have 60 days to formally notify the employees and carry out the terminations. Farid signed the papers methodically, while Tamika translated the legal clauses. She felt complicit in a mass betrayal. Farid, she said in Arabic as they left the office, can I speak frankly with you? Of course. Don't you think you should give the company a chance to recover? Many families depend on these jobs. Farid stopped walking and stared at her. Tamika, you read the audit report, didn't you? She lowered her head, confirming. Then you know it's not just mismanagement. There's fraud involved. Millions of dollars were embezzled by the American directors. I can't keep funding corruption. But the employees aren't to blame for the directors' corruption. No, they're not. And that's why I'm paying generous severance to everyone, far beyond what the law requires. And then, what will happen to these people? Farid sighed. Tamika, I'm not responsible for solving all of America's social problems. I'm an investor, not a politician. She stayed silent the rest of the way back to the office. Farid seemed to genuinely care about her, but saw the other employees as just numbers on a spreadsheet. That afternoon, Tamika decided to go down to the janitorial floor again. She needed to at least try to warn her co-workers about what was coming. Everyone, I need to talk to you, she said, approaching the group on their coffee break. Now you want to talk to us? Shirley asked scornfully. It's important. You all need to start looking for other jobs. Why? Asked Miss Rose, a woman in her 60s who had worked at the company for 20 years. Because I've heard rumors there might be changes at the company. What kind of changes? Shirley pressed. Tamika hesitated. If she told the truth, she could lose her job. But if she didn't, these women would be blindsided. There might be layoffs. It's better to be prepared. Layoffs? Ms. Rose turned pale. Oh God, I can't lose this job. I have 3 grandchildren to raise. Calm down, Ms. Rose. I said it's just rumors. Rumors you heard working with the Arab? Shirley asked suspiciously. Shirley, I'm just trying to help you all. Help? You left us to work with the enemy, and now you come here spreading panic. He's not the enemy, isn't he? Then why can't you tell us straight what's happening? Tamika didn't know how to respond. The women walked away from her, murmuring worriedly among themselves. She had only managed to scare them without being able to offer concrete information. When she returned to the executive floor, she found Farid talking to Richard Owens. The two seemed to have just finished a tense argument. Ah, Tamika, Farid said. Perfect. I need you to translate something for Mr. Owens. Of course, Farid addressed her in Arabic. Tell him I know exactly where the $23 million embezzled from the company over the last 2 years are. Tell him I have all the proof, and he has until tomorrow to return the money, or I'll hand everything over to the authorities. Tamika swallowed hard. Farid had known about the corruption for a long time. He said, he wants to discuss some financial matters with you, she translated, softening the message. Financial matters? Richard asked, visibly sweating. Farid waited for the translation and responded angrily in Arabic. Don't soften my words, translate exactly what I said. Tamika felt cornered. He said, he knows about financial irregularities in the company and wants a quick solution. Richard grew even more nervous. What kind of irregularities? Farid replied directly in broken English. You know what kind. 23 million. Shell companies. Fake contracts. Richard's face turned white as paper. Mr. Al-Mansour, there must be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Farid answered, switching back to Arabic. Tamika, translate. He has 24 hours to start returning the stolen money. If he doesn't, I'll sue him and all his accomplices for international fraud. This time, Tamika translated exactly. Richard stumbled out of the room, his legs unsteady. Farid, Tamika said when they were alone, why didn't you tell me you already knew about the corruption? Because if you'd known from the start, you might not have agreed to work for me. And I needed someone trustworthy to help me understand all the nuances in these conversations. So you used me. I offered you an honest, well-paying job. You chose to accept it. Tamika felt manipulated, but at the same time, she recognized Farid hadn't lied to her. He'd simply withheld the full truth. And now? What happens next? Now we'll see if they return the stolen money, or if I'd rather have their reputations publicly destroyed. What about the innocent employees? Farid looked at her with a softer expression. Tamika, can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. Why do you care so much about people who treated you poorly when you were a janitor? Because I know what it's like to be treated unfairly. I know what it's like to lose everything because of someone else's actions. What happened to you in the past, Tamika? Why was a university professor with a PhD working as a janitor? She hesitated. It had been years since anyone had asked directly about her story. It's complicated. I have time. Tamika sat in the chair across from Farid's desk. For a moment, she traveled back in time. 7 years ago, I was a professor of Eastern languages at Columbia University, a specialist in classical Arabic and medieval literature. I had a good life, a promising career. What changed? A scandal. A senior professor in the department was accused of falsifying research to secure international funding. When they started investigating, they found he'd used my name on some documents without my permission. And you were framed? Worse. I'd refused to take part in an overbilling scheme for academic conferences he was organizing. When the scandal broke, he pointed the finger at me as the real mastermind behind the fraud, said I'd planned everything and he was just a victim. Farid listened intently. And the university believed him? He'd been respected for 30 years. I was a young professor, a woman black. Who do you think they chose to believe? That was unfair. It was more than unfair, it was devastating. I lost my job, my reputation, my academic friends. No university in the United States would hire me after that. I spent 2 years trying to prove my innocence, burning through all my savings on lawyers. And did you succeed? Eventually, yes. The professor confessed the truth on his deathbed before he passed. But by then, it was too late. I was broke, discredited, and Jasmine was still little. I had to take whatever work I could to survive. Farid was silent for a few minutes. Tamika, what was the name of that professor who framed you? Why do you want to know? Curiosity. Frederick Hamilton Jones. Farid wrote the name on a piece of paper. And which university abroad did you work at? You mentioned spending time in the Middle East. Cairo University for 2 years, and then at King Saud University in Riyadh for another 2 years. But when the scandal reached the ears of the international academic community, I was fired from there too. Interesting, murmured Farid. Why interesting? Nothing, just, it's an interesting coincidence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Tamika came home mentally exhausted. Telling her story to Farid had reopened old wounds she preferred to keep closed. Jasmine was studying for college entrance exams. How was your day, Mom? Complicated. Jasmine, can I ask you something? Of course. If you had the chance to have a better life, but it meant other people might get hurt, what would you do? Jasmine stopped writing and looked at her mother. What kind of hurt? Losing jobs, for example. Mom, does this have to do with your work? Maybe. Jasmine thought for a moment. Mom, remember when you always told me that doing the right thing isn't always doing the easy thing? I remember. Then you already know the answer. Tamika smiled sadly. Her daughter had become a wise young woman. But what if doing the right thing means we'd go back to struggling? Mom, we've been through worse, and we've always managed to survive. I'd rather be poor with a clear conscience than rich, knowing I contributed to other people's suffering. Tamika hugged her daughter, proud of the woman she was becoming. The next morning, Tamika arrived at the office determined to talk to Fareed about an alternative to shutting down the company. But when she reached his office, she found total chaos. Richard Owens was shouting at Fareed while two other directors tried to calm him down. "You can't do this to us," Richard yelled. "We can't return $23 million overnight." Fareed remained calm, responding in Arabic for Tamika to translate. "Tell him he should have thought about that before stealing the money. He said you should have considered the consequences before taking the money," Tamika translated. "Consequences?" Michael Williams exploded. "Do you know the consequences this will have for our families?" Fareed replied coldly. "Tell him the consequences for the families of honest employees who'll be fired because of their corruption are much worse." When Tamika translated, Richard turned to her angrily. "And you, enjoying watching our downfall, crawled out of the gutter to get back at those who have more than you?" "Richard, I'm just doing my job," Tamika answered calmly. Your job was cleaning toilets, not ruining lives." "You're the ones who ruined lives when you stole from the company," she shot back, losing patience. "Us? We built this company, created jobs, boosted the economy. You created jobs with stolen money, and now hundreds of people will pay for your greed." Fareed watched the argument with interest, even though he didn't understand everything being said. "Tamika," he said in Arabic, "tell them I'm willing to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" she asked, also in Arabic. "If they return 50% of the stolen money within the next 30 days, I'll keep the company running and won't press criminal charges." Tamika translated the offer. The directors exchanged glances. "What about the other 50%? Michael asked. Fareed answered. "The other 50% will be considered an investment in a new social project I plan to implement here in the United States." "What kind of social project?" Fareed looked at Tamika before answering. "An education center to teach languages to underprivileged youth." Tamika widened her eyes, surprised by the proposal. "And who would run this center?" asked Richard suspiciously. Fareed smiled. "Someone with the necessary qualifications, a professor with a doctorate and international experience." Tamika felt her heart race. Was Fareed offering her the chance to teach again? "You have 48 hours to decide," Fareed concluded. "Either accept my proposal, or I turn over all the evidence to the authorities." The directors left the room in silence, clearly disturbed by the ultimatum. "Fareed," Tamika said when they were alone, "are you serious about the education center?" "Completely serious, but only if you agree to lead the project." I don't know what to say." "Say yes. You'd return to teaching, I'd keep the company running, the workers would keep their jobs, and on top of that we'd create educational opportunities for underprivileged youth. And if the directors refuse to return the money, then they go to prison, and I shut down the company anyway. But at least I'll have tried to give everyone a second chance." Tamika fell silent, processing the proposal. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. "Why would you do this for me?" Fareed stepped closer. "Tamika, can I tell you a secret?" "Go ahead." "I didn't come to the United States just to solve this company's financial problems." "No?" "I also came to investigate a personal case. 7 years ago, my youngest cousin was accused of academic fraud at King Saud University. He was a professor of classical Arabic literature." Tamika felt her blood run cold. What was his name?" "Jamal al-Mansour. Did you know him?" "Jamal," she murmured. "He was my research supervisor in Riyadh." "And do you know what happened to him?" Tamika lowered her head. He was accused of falsifying research data, fired from the university, returned to Saudi Arabia in disgrace. Exactly. And who accused him? A visiting American professor, Frederick Hamilton Jones. Fareed nodded gravely. The same man who destroyed your career in the United States. Jamal always told me he'd been used as a scapegoat by that corrupt American, but he could never prove his innocence. My God, Tamika whispered. Jamal was innocent. Completely. And when I learned Frederick had done the same thing to an American professor, I decided to investigate. That's how I found you. So you already knew who I was when you offered me the job? I did. But I needed to be sure you were truly the victim and not Frederick's accomplice. Tamika sank heavily into a chair. Jamal, how is he now? He lost his will to live. Spent 5 years in deep depression. Only recently has he started recovering, working as a freelance translator. I'm so sorry, I always believed in his innocence, but back then I was dealing with my own problems and couldn't help. Tamika, maybe you couldn't help Jamal then, but you can help hundreds of others now. Will you lead the education center? She looked into Fareed's eyes and saw sincerity. I accept, but on one condition. What? I want Jamal to be invited to work with us as a professor of classical Arabic literature. Fareed smiled. I already sent him the invitation yesterday. He arrives in the United States next week. That afternoon, the directors returned with their answer. Richard Owens looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. Mr. Al-Mansour, we accept your proposal, he said, his voice trembling. Will you be able to return the $11.5 million in 30 days? We will. We'll have to sell personal assets, but we'll manage. Good. Tamika, translate the terms of the agreement for them. Over the next hour, Tamika translated the terms of the deal that would save the company and establish the education center. The executives would sign confessions of guilt, which would remain on file as insurance that they would honor the agreement. When the meeting ended, Richard approached Tamika. You won, he said bitterly. No one won here, Richard. We're just trying to minimize the damage you caused. Do you really think a former janitor can run an education center? I was never just a janitor. I was a university professor who temporarily had to work as a janitor to survive. Just like you were never just a corrupt executive. You were a man who temporarily chose to steal to get rich. Richard left the room without responding. Fareed smiled at Tamika. Well said. Now how about we visit the site where our center will be built? They left the corporate building and took a car toward the east side of New York City. Fareed had purchased a large plot of land in an underserved area close to several public schools. This is where the Jamal Tamika International Education Center will be built, Fareed said, pointing to the empty lot. Jamal Tamika? Yes, a tribute to the 2 teachers who were wronged by the same corrupt man. Tamika felt her eyes fill with tears. After 7 years of humiliation and struggle, she would finally have the chance to teach again. Fareed, how can I ever thank you? By making this center a model of educational excellence, proving that true knowledge can't be destroyed by temporary injustices. That night, Tamika returned home and told Jasmine everything. Her daughter cried with emotion upon learning that her mother would finally return to the profession she loved. Mom, I'm so proud of you, Jasmine said, hugging her. Proud of what? I didn't do anything extraordinary. You kept your dignity even in the worst circumstances. You never stopped being who you truly are, even when the whole world tried to convince you otherwise. Jasmine, can I ask you something? Of course. Would you like to be one of the first students at the center? You could learn Arabic, Mandarin, Spanish. Really, I'd love that, especially Arabic. I've always wanted to understand that part of your life you never talked about. Tamika smiled. Finally, she could fully share her passion for languages with her daughter. In the following weeks, the Education Center project took shape quickly. Fareed hired the best architects and engineers in New York City to create a modern, welcoming space. Jamal Al-Mansour arrived in the United States on a rainy Thursday. Tamika and Fareed picked him up at JFK. Tamika, Jamal said when he saw her. Professor Tamika? Jamal, she replied in Arabic. embracing her former supervisor. Jamal was thinner and grayer, but his eyes still shone with the same intelligence as years before. "I always knew you were innocent," she said, "and I always knew you were too. Frederick Hamilton Jones destroyed so many lives with his lies. But now we have the chance to rebuild what was broken." Over the next few months, Tamika worked tirelessly on the center's educational plans. She developed curricula for Arabic, Mandarin, French, Spanish, and German, all tailored for youth from underserved communities. Resistance came from many sides. Some locals distrusted the motives of an Arabic investor. Others believed poor kids couldn't handle learning complex languages. "Professor Tamika," one mother said during a community meeting, "do you really think my son, who barely speaks proper English, can learn Arabic?" "Mrs. Mary, I believe your son has the same potential as any middle-class child. The difference is that he never had the opportunity to develop that potential. But what's the point of learning Arabic if you live in the projects? To open doors we don't even know exist. To show that knowledge has no social class." Jamal also faced challenges. Some students initially mocked his accent and his different appearance. "Professor," said a 16-year-old named Tyler, "why should we learn the language of terrorists?" Jamal stayed calm. "Tyler, Arabic is spoken by over 400 million people in the world. It's the language of science, math, philosophy, and poetry. Judging a language by prejudices about some of its speakers is like judging English by American criminals. But I'll never need to speak Arabic in my life. Maybe not, but by learning Arabic, you'll develop your brain in ways you can't imagine. And who knows, one day it might open unexpected doors for you." Gradually, the prejudices began to fade. The first students started showing impressive progress. Jasmine stood out particularly in Arabic, displaying the same passion for languages as her mother. 6 months after opening, the center already had a waiting list of over 1,000 young people eager to study. "Tamika," Fareed said during a visit, "the results have exceeded my expectations." "And mine too. These kids remind me why I fell in love with teaching. There's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "I received an offer from a federal university to partner with our center. They want to offer full scholarships to our top students." "Really? Which university?" "The same one where you used to work. Columbia." Tamika felt a mix of emotions and apprehension. "And do you think I should accept? I think it's an opportunity to show the entire American academic community who you really are." The meeting at Columbia was scheduled for a Friday. Tamika stepped onto the university campus for the first time in 7 years, filled with nostalgia and anxiety. The dean, Professor Anthony Fields, welcomed her warmly. "Professor Tamika, it's an honor to have you back at the university." "Thank you, Professor Fields. I must say your reputation has been completely restored after Professor Hamilton Jones's confession. We deeply regret what happened." "The past is the past, Professor. I'm interested in the future." During the meeting, the terms of the partnership were set. Columbia would offer 20 full scholarships per year for students from the Education Center, as well as officially recognize the language certificates issued by the center. "Professor Tamika," the dean said at the end of the meeting, "I'd like to extend a personal invitation." "What is it?" "How about returning to teach here as well? As a visiting professor, we could create a special program for Eastern languages." Tamika hesitated. "Professor, I appreciate the offer, but my commitment now is to underprivileged youth. I can't abandon them." "I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm proposing you split your time. 2 mornings a week here, the rest at the center." "I need to think about it." "Of course, but I hope you'll seriously consider it. It would inspire both our university students and the kids at the center." That night, Tamika talked to Jasmine about the offer. "Mom, you should accept," Jasmine said, "but the center needs me full-time." "Mom, the center is already running perfectly. You've built an amazing team of teachers. And besides, imagine the impact you'd have teaching at Columbia again. You'd show everyone it's possible to recover from injustice." "You really think so?" "I'm sure of it, and there's more. I'm starting college next year. It would be amazing to have my mom as a professor at the same university." Tamika smiled. "You want to study literature?" "I want to study international relations. With all the languages I'm learning, I think I can make a difference in American diplomacy. I'm so proud of you, my daughter. I'm the one who's proud of you, Mom. You taught me that no matter how many times life knocks us down, we can always get back up and start over. A week later, Tamika gave her answer to the dean. She agreed to teach at Columbia 2 mornings a week. The first day of class at the university was emotional. The room was packed with students eager to meet the professor, who had become a legend for her story of perseverance. "Good morning, class," Tamika said. "My name is Tamika Johnson, and I'll be teaching you about the beauty and complexity of the Arabic language." A student raised his hand. "Professor, is it true you worked as a janitor?" "It's true, and I'm not ashamed of it. I learned that honest work, no matter what it is always worthy of respect." "But wasn't it humiliating?" "It was painful, yes, but it was also educational. It taught me to see people differently. It taught me that true knowledge doesn't depend on the position we hold." "And how did you manage not to give up?" Tamika thought for a moment. "I didn't manage not to give up. I gave up many times. I cried, I rebelled, I thought about quitting everything. But I always remembered I had a daughter depending on me, and that somewhere out there were young people who could benefit from the knowledge I had to offer." The class continued in an atmosphere of respect and admiration. At the end, several students approached to talk further. "Professor," a young student said, "you've inspired me. I'm going to sign up as a volunteer at your education center." "That would be wonderful, Chelsea. We always need people willing to share knowledge." In the following months, the education center grew exponentially. Partnerships were formed with international companies, which began offering internships to the most advanced students. Tyler, the same young man who had initially questioned the importance of Arabic, landed an internship at an international trade company doing business with Arabic-speaking countries. "Professor Tamika," he said during a graduation ceremony, "you changed my life." "No, Tyler, you changed your own life. I just showed you a possible path. But if you hadn't believed in me, I just saw the potential that was already inside you. And that exists in every young person in this community." Farid watched the ceremony with satisfaction. "Tamika, you've exceeded all my expectations," he said. "Farid, you gave me the chance to be who I truly am. How can I thank you?" "By continuing to be the exceptional teacher you've always been." Jamal joined them. "Cousin," he said to Farid, "I think Frederick Hamilton Jones did us an unintentional favor." "How so?" "If he hadn't destroyed our careers, we never would have created this project. Hundreds of young people would never have had access to this quality education." Tamika smiled. "Jamal is right. Sometimes what seems like our greatest tragedy becomes the doorway to our greatest triumph." 2 years after the center's opening, a special ceremony was held. The mayor of New York City, the state governor, and the Saudi Arabian ambassador were in attendance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tamika said at the microphone, "when I started cleaning offices 3 years ago, I never imagined I'd be standing here today, speaking to you as the director of an internationally recognized education center." The audience applauded. "But I want to make one thing clear. I'm not ashamed of the years I spent as a janitor. They taught me valuable lessons about humility, resilience, and the dignity of work." She continued, "This center isn't just a place where young people learn languages. It's a symbol that true knowledge cannot be destroyed by temporary injustices. It's proof that quality education should not be a privilege for the few." Farid stood up and began to applaud, followed by the entire audience. "I want to thank Farid Al-Mansour, who believed in me when I had lost hope myself. I want to thank Jamal Al-Mansour, who showed me it's possible to rebuild a career unjustly destroyed." She looked at Jasmine in the front row. "And I want to thank my daughter Jasmine, who always believed her mother was so much more than she appeared to be." Jasmine wiped a tear from her cheek. "But most of all, I want to thank all the young people who have passed through this center. You reminded me why I chose to be a teacher. You gave me back my passion for teaching." The ceremony ended with student performances in various languages. Tyler recited a poem in Arabic. A young woman named Brittany sang a song in Mandarin. Jasmine gave a speech in 3 languages about the importance of multicultural education. Later, during the reception, Tamika met Shirley, her former cleaning supervisor. "Tamika," Shirley said, visibly embarrassed. I want to apologize to you. Apologize for what, Shirley? For treating you poorly when you were a janitor, for not believing in you. Shirley, you were just doing your job. And besides, you were also a victim of a system that teaches us to distrust one another. Still, I feel terrible. And I want to tell you something. My daughter enrolled to study French here at the center. That's wonderful. I'm sure she'll be an excellent student. Thank you, Tamika, for everything you're doing for our community. As they spoke, Richard Owens approached. He had fulfilled his part of the agreement and now worked as a financial consultant in a much more modest position than before. Tamika, he said, can I speak with you? Of course, Richard. I want to ask for your forgiveness, for everything I said, for how I treated you. Richard, you were afraid of losing everything you had built, I understand. No, there's no excuse for what I did. You were just doing your job, and I attacked you personally. And what have you learned from this whole experience? Richard thought for a moment. I've learned that wealth built on lies is worthless, and that people like you who keep their dignity even in the worst circumstances are far richer than I ever imagined. Richard, we all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. Tamika, can I do you a favor? What favor? My consulting firm is doing well. I'd like to create a scholarship fund for students at your center. It would be a way to try and repair some of the harm I caused. Tamika smiled. That would be a very welcome contribution, Richard. As the night went on, Tamika reflected on her journey. She had lost much, but she had also gained things she never thought possible. Fareed approached her. What are you thinking about? How mysterious life is. If someone had told me 3 years ago that I'd be here today, I never would have believed it. And there are more surprises ahead. How so? Fareed smiled mysteriously. King Saud University reached out to me. They want to establish a partnership with our center, and they'd like to invite you for a semester as a visiting professor. Go back to Saudi Arabia. It would be an opportunity to show the entire Arabic academic community who you truly are, and as a bonus, Jamal could return to teaching at the university where he was wronged. Tamika looked at Jamal, who was chatting animatedly with a group of young students. But the center? I can't abandon it. You wouldn't be abandoning it. It would just be 1 semester, and Jasmine could go with you as an exchange student. The idea was tempting, but Tamika had commitments in the United States. Fareed, I need to think this through carefully. Of course, but no, this would be a unique opportunity to complete your redemption story. That evening, Tamika came home exhausted but happy. Jasmine was in the living room, studying for her college entrance exams. How was the ceremony, Mom? Wonderful, and I have some news for you. Tamika told her about the invitation from the Saudi University. Mom, you have to accept, Jasmine said immediately, but it means leaving the center for 6 months. Mom, the center is well established. You've built an amazing team, and imagine what an experience it would be for me to study abroad. You'd really want to spend 6 months in Saudi Arabia? I'd love to. It'd be a chance to experience Arabic culture firsthand, to improve the language I learned from you. What about your studies here? I can take a semester off, or even study there and transfer the credits later. Tamika hugged her daughter. Jasmine, how did you get so wise? I learned from an exceptional teacher who also happens to be my mom. 2 weeks later, Tamika announced her decision. She would accept the invitation to teach at Riyadh University for a semester. The news stirred mixed emotions at the center. The students were sad about their director's temporary absence, but also proud that she was being recognized internationally. Professor, Tyler said during the farewell gathering, you're coming back, right? Of course I'm coming back, Tyler. This center is my home. You all are my family. What if they offer you a permanent position there? I won't stay. My place is here, with you. Fareed organized a farewell party at the center. Former students returned to say goodbye, teachers gave heartfelt speeches, and even past critics came to wish her well. Tamika, Fareed said in his speech, you've transformed not just these young lives but mine as well. You showed me that the most valuable investments are those that change lives. Jamal also spoke. 3 years ago, I was a bitter man, destroyed by injustice. Tamika showed me we can turn our pain into strength to help others. She gave me hope again. Shirley approached Tamika at the end of the party. "Professor, I want to tell you something." "What is it, Shirley?" "My daughter got accepted into the literature program. She said she wants to be a teacher like you." "That's wonderful. She'll be an excellent teacher. She said you're her proof that any obstacle can be overcome." Tamika felt tears welling up. "Tell her the most important thing isn't never falling down, but always having the courage to get back up." The trip to Riyadh was scheduled for the start of the next semester. The night before leaving, Tamika visited her father's grave. She had lost him as a child. "Dad," she said, placing flowers on the tombstone, "I hope you're proud of your daughter. I know it wasn't easy raising a black girl alone in the 70s, but you taught me never to give up on my dreams." Jasmine stood beside her. "Grandpa would be so proud, Mom. You've achieved every dream he had for you." "No, sweetheart. I've achieved far more than he or I ever imagined possible." At the airport, hundreds gathered to see her off. Students, alumni, teachers, staff, and even community members who'd never studied there but recognized the center's impact. "Professor Tamika," a child in the crowd called out, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Tamika smiled tearfully. "Be better than me, sweetheart. Be so much better." Farid walked Tamika and Jasmine to the boarding gate. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little. It's been a while since I traveled abroad." "You'll be surprised by the reception waiting for you. Your story is already known at several Arabic universities." "What do you mean?" "Jamal wouldn't stop talking about you to his old colleagues. The American teacher who was wronged by the same man who persecuted him and who was now transforming lives in the United States." During the flight, Tamika reflected on her journey. 3 years ago, she was a desperate janitor about to be evicted. Now she was an internationally recognized educator, traveling to teach at the prestigious King Saud University in Riyadh. "Mom," said Jasmine during the flight, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you ever doubt you could recover?" "Many times. There were moments I thought I'd never be respected as a teacher again." "What kept you going?" "You. And the certainty that true knowledge can never be destroyed forever. It might be temporarily obscured, but it always finds a way to shine again." In Riyadh, the welcome was warmer than she expected. The university's dean, Dr. Ibrahim Rahman, personally greeted them at the airport. "Professor Tamika," he said in Arabic, "it's an honor to have you at our university." "The honor is mine, Dr. Rahman. Your story has inspired many teachers here. It shows that truth always prevails, even when it takes time to come to light." The university had arranged a comfortable apartment for Tamika and Jasmine. On the first day of class, the room was packed with curious students. "Good morning, everyone," Tamika said in flawless Arabic. "My name is Tamika Johnson, and I'll be teaching you about contemporary American literature." A student raised his hand. "Professor, is it true you worked as a janitor in the US?" "It's true, and I'm not ashamed of it. But how could a PhD professor work as a janitor? Because honest work is never shameful, and because sometimes life puts us in situations that test our resilience." The question gave Tamika the chance to share her story. The students listened, fascinated by her tale of downfall and redemption. "Professor," a young student said at the end of class, "you've inspired me. I want to start a project teaching English to refugees here in Riyadh." "That's a wonderful idea, Amira. Education is always the best way to build bridges between cultures." During her semester in Riyadh, Tamika didn't just teach. She also developed exchange programs between American and Arab universities. Jasmine excelled as an international relations student and became nearly fluent in Arabic. "Mom," Jasmine said one evening, "I'm thinking about doing my master's here after graduating in the US. That would be a great opportunity for you. And maybe working at the American embassy in an Arab country someday. I'm sure you'd be an exceptional diplomat." Midway through the semester, Tamika got an unexpected call from the US. It was Farid. "How are things over there?" he asked. "Wonderful. And the center?" "Running perfectly. Actually, I have news for you." "What news?" The Department of Education approved our project to open 5 new education centers across the US, 1 in each region. Really? That's amazing. And there's more. They want you to be the national director of the project. Fareed, that's incredible. But it means a lot more responsibility. It also means a lot more impact. Imagine how many young people we can help nationwide. When do I need to decide? No rush. Think it over and let me know when you're back. That night, Tamika talked at length with Jasmine about the offer. Mom, you have to accept, Jasmine said. It's the chance to multiply the impact of the original project. But it means constant travel, overseeing 5 different centers. Mom, you always told me that when we have the chance to do good, we shouldn't waste it. You're right, sweetheart. The semester in Riyadh passed quickly. At the closing ceremony, Tamika gave a moving speech about the importance of collaboration between cultures. Students, she said, you've taught me as much as I've taught you. You've shown that knowledge knows no borders, that wisdom can be shared among any people. Dr. Rahman made a surprise announcement. Professor Tamika, the university would like to offer you a permanent position on our faculty. Tamika was taken aback by the offer. Dr. Rahman, I'm honored by the invitation, but my commitment is to the United States. That's where I can make the greatest difference. We understand and respect your decision, but know that the doors of this university will always be open to you. Thank you, and I hope we can continue our partnership through the exchange programs. Upon returning to the United States, Tamika and Jasmine were greeted at the airport by an even larger crowd than at their farewell. The education center had become a symbol of hope for the entire community. Professor, the students shouted as she appeared at the arrival gate. We missed you, yelled Tyler, who now worked at the International Trade Company and had been promoted. Fareed approached with a huge smile. So, have you decided about the Department of Education's proposal? I have. I'll accept the role as National Director of the project. The crowd erupted in applause. But on one condition, Tamika continued. What is it? I want Jamal to be the National Academic Director, and I want each center to have the autonomy to develop programs suited to their region's needs. Perfect, Fareed said. We're going to change language education in the United States. 6 months later, all 5 education centers were up and running. The one in New York City remained the largest, but those in Boston, Miami, Denver, and Seattle already had long waiting lists. Tamika traveled constantly, overseeing the programs and training new teachers. Jasmine had graduated with a degree in international relations and now worked as the project's international exchange coordinator. During a visit to the Miami Center, Tamika was approached by a young local teacher. Professor Tamika, can I tell you a story? Of course, Amber. 2 years ago, I was unemployed with a degree in literature but no prospects. When I heard about the education centers, I applied to teach French. Now, besides working here, I'm pursuing a master's in applied linguistics. That's wonderful, Amber. But the most important thing, my 12-year-old daughter is studying Arabic here at the center. She says when she grows up, she wants to be a diplomat like Jasmine. Quality education transforms generations, Amber. Your story proves that. At a national ceremony in Washington, D.C., where all 5 centers were officially recognized by the federal government, Tamika delivered her most important speech. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed an audience that included cabinet members, ambassadors, and hundreds of educators. 4 years ago, I cleaned offices to survive. Today, I lead an education project serving thousands of young people across the United States. The audience gave her a standing ovation. I don't share this to boast, but to show that transformation is possible, that true knowledge can overcome any adversity. She continued, this project isn't about teaching languages, it's about teaching hope. It's about showing young people from underprivileged communities that they can dream beyond the limits of their circumstances. Fareed, seated in the front row, smiled proudly. I want to thank Fareed Al-Mansour, who believed in me when I doubted my own worth. I want to thank Jamal Al-Mansour, who showed me that pain can be turned into purpose. Jamal wiped a tear from his face. But most of all, I want to thank every young person who has passed through our centers. You've reminded me that true education is an act of love. Love for knowledge, love for others, love for a better future. Jasmine, now 22 years old and fluent in 5 languages, also gave a speech. My mother taught me that it doesn't matter where we come from, but where we're going. That education is the only inheritance no one can take from us. She looked at Tamika. Today, I have the privilege of working beside the woman I admire most in the world. A woman who turned adversity into opportunity, humiliation into inspiration. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, many people approached Tamika to congratulate her. Professor, said a young man she didn't recognize. May I introduce myself? I'm Aaron Phillips, a doctoral student at Columbia. Nice to meet you, Aaron. I'd like to write my thesis on the social impact of your education centers. Would that be possible? Of course, I'd be honored. Professor, may I ask a personal question? Go ahead. Have you completely forgiven the professor who wronged you in the past? Tamika thought for a moment. Aaron, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's choosing not to let what happened continue to define us. Yes, I've forgiven, because holding on to resentment would be like letting him keep controlling my life. The young man wrote down her answer in a notebook. Thank you, Professor. Your story is truly inspiring. Later, Tamika spoke with Fareed about the next steps for the project. Tamika, I have a new proposal for you. Another one? The United Nations Educational Organization wants you to join an international panel on inclusive education in Paris. Really? Your story has inspired educators worldwide. They want you to share your experience with representatives from 50 countries. Fareed, sometimes I still can't believe all this is happening. Believe it, Tamika. You deserve every bit of recognition you're receiving. And do you think I should accept? I think you should accept anything that can amplify the impact of your work. The trip to Paris was scheduled for the following month. Jasmine accompanied her as an assistant and interpreter. At the UNESCO panel, Tamika found herself sharing the stage with renowned educators from around the world. When it was her turn to speak, she stood with confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, she said in fluent French, my name is Tamika Johnson, and I represent the United States on this panel. 5 years ago, I was a janitor. Today, I lead an educational project serving 15,000 young people across 5 American states. The audience of over 1,000 fell completely silent. I don't say this for shock value, but to show that educational transformation can happen in the most unexpected places, through the most unlikely people. For the next 30 minutes, Tamika shared her story and explained the methodology of her education centers. When she finished, she received a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After her presentation, dozens of educators approached her to talk. Dr. Johnson, said a French professor, I'd like to adapt your model for immigrant communities in Paris. Professor, said a Japanese educator, would you come to Japan to lead seminars on inclusive education? Dr. Johnson, said a representative from Finland, the Finnish government would like to establish an educational partnership with your centers. Tamika felt overwhelmed by the flood of proposals. I appreciate everyone's interest, she said, but I need to consult my team back in the United States before making any international commitments. During the official dinner, Tamika sat beside the Director General of UNESCO. Dr. Johnson, he said, your presentation was the most impactful of the panel. I'd like to extend an official invitation. What kind of invitation? To join our Advisory Council on Inclusive Education. It would be an honorary position, but with global influence. I need to think about it. Of course, but know that your voice would be very valuable in discussions about global education policies. That night at the hotel, Tamika talked to Jasmine about all the proposals she had received. Mom, you're being recognized worldwide. It's incredible. Yes, honey, but at the same time, it's scary. I feel an enormous responsibility. Mom, you always told me that with great opportunities come great responsibilities. You're right. But I need to be careful not to lose focus on what really matters, the young people in our centers. Mom, accepting these international opportunities could amplify our impact even more. Back in the United States, Tamika gathered the entire team from all 5 centers to discuss the international proposals. "Everyone," she said during the video conference connecting all the centers, "we've received several proposals to expand our work internationally. But before deciding anything, I want to hear from you." Jamal was the first to speak. "Tamika, I think we should accept the proposals that don't compromise our work here in the US. We can influence global education policies while keeping our local focus." "I agree with Jamal," said Amber from the Miami Center. "Our experience could help young people in other countries too. But we have to be careful," warned Thomas, director of the Denver Center. "We can't grow faster than our ability to maintain quality." After 3 hours of discussion, they reached a consensus. They would accept the position on the UNESCO board and 2 international partnerships, but decline invitations to physically expand into other countries. "Our mission is to be an example others can replicate," Tamika concluded, "not necessarily to do everything ourselves." 6 months later, the Education Center project celebrated its 5th anniversary. The commemorative ceremony was held simultaneously at all 5 centers, connected by video conference. Tamika gave an emotional speech. "Friends, 5 years ago, we were an impossible dream. A former janitor wanting to create an education center. Today, we are a reality that has transformed the lives of over 20,000 young people." The audience applauded enthusiastically. But the most important thing isn't the numbers, it's the stories. Like Tyler's, who went from an angry young man to becoming a manager at an international company. Like Brittany's, who became a translator at the UN. Like the hundreds of young people who discovered potential they never imagined they had. Jasmine, now the national coordinator for exchanges, also gave a speech. "I grew up watching my mother fight to maintain our dignity in the worst circumstances. Today, I have the privilege of working beside her to give other young people the opportunities we almost didn't have." Fareed gave the closing remarks. "Tamika, when I met you, I saw a janitor who spoke Arabic. Today I see one of the greatest educators in the United States. Thank you for letting me be part of this extraordinary journey." During the reception, Tamika was approached by a journalist. "Professor Tamika, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. If you could send a message to someone going through the same hardships you faced, what would it be?" Tamika thought carefully before answering. "I'd say that temporary adversities don't define our permanent worth. That true knowledge is indestructible, and that sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to discover our true strength." "And if someone asked if all the suffering was worth it?" "I'd say I wouldn't wish suffering on anyone. But without it, I might never have discovered my ability to endure, to reinvent myself, to help others. Suffering isn't necessary, but it can be transformed into purpose." The journalist noted the answers and walked away. Jamal approached Tamika. "Cousin, how do you feel about all this?" "Grateful, Jamal. Deeply grateful." "Grateful for what?" "For discovering that we're much stronger than we imagined, for learning that falls can be springboards, for finding my true life purpose." "And what is your true purpose?" "To show people who've lost hope that new beginnings are possible, that education is the most powerful tool to transform lives." That night, Tamika arrived home and found a letter in the mailbox. It was from the office of the president. "Jasmine," she shouted, "come see this." Jasmine ran to the living room. "What is it, Mom?" "An official letter. The president wants to honor me with the National Medal of Educational Excellence." "Mom, that's amazing." Tamika sat on the couch, still in disbelief. "Sweetheart, sometimes I wonder if all this isn't just a dream." "It's real, Mom. You deserve every bit of recognition you're getting." "Jasmine, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "There are moments when I miss the simplicity of my life as a cleaner. Not the humiliations, but the simplicity." "Why?" "Because now I carry so much responsibility. Thousands of people depend on the success of our projects. It's an enormous pressure." "Mom, remember when you told me that with great power comes great responsibility?" "I do. You have the power to change lives, and you're using that power the best way possible." "Thank you, daughter, for always believing in me." "Thank you, Mom, for showing me that strong women raise strong daughters." The award ceremony was scheduled for the following month in Washington, D.C. Tamika would be one of 5 people honored by the president. On the day of the ceremony, she arrived at the White House accompanied by Jasmine, Fareed, Jamal, and representatives from the 5 education centers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the president said during the ceremony, "today we honor Americans who have distinguished themselves through exceptional contributions to our nation's education." When it was Tamika's turn, the president read her biography. Tamika Johnson, teacher, educator, and national director of the International Education Centers Project. After suffering injustices that led her to work as a cleaner, she rebuilt her career and created one of the country's most important inclusive education initiatives, benefiting over 20,000 young Americans. Tamika stepped forward to receive the medal. "Professor Johnson," he said, "your story proves that the United States is a country where dreams are possible, even under the most difficult circumstances." "Thank you, Mr. President. This medal isn't just mine. It belongs to every young person who believed education could change their lives." After the ceremony, during the reception, many officials approached Tamika. "Professor," said the Secretary of Education, "I'd like to propose a national expansion of your project, 100 centers across the country." "Mr. Secretary, we'd be honored, but we must do this responsibly, maintaining quality." "Of course, we could start with 10 new centers per year." The offer was tempting, but Tamika knew rapid growth could compromise the project's standards. On the flight back to New York City, she discussed the proposal with her team. "What do you all think?" she asked. "I say we accept," Jamal said, "but gradually and with careful planning." "I agree," Jasmine added. "We could start with 5 new centers a year." "What if we created a certification program for other educators?" Fareed suggested. "That way others could replicate our model without needing our direct oversight." "Brilliant idea," Tamika agreed. "A social franchise program." In the following months, they developed a comprehensive certification program. Educators from across the United States signed up to learn the methodology of the centers and create their own units. A year later, there were already 50 centers operating nationwide, remotely supervised by the original team. During a national conference of educators, Tamika reflected on the results. "Friends, when we started this project, our goal was to show that quality education is possible anywhere. Today, we can say we've fulfilled that mission." The audience of 1,000 educators applauded. But our work is far from over. As long as there's one young American without access to quality education, we'll have work to do. After the conference, a young teacher approached Tamika. "Professor, may I introduce myself? I'm Chelsea Wilson, director of the center in Phoenix." "Nice to meet you, Chelsea. I want to tell you a story. 3 years ago, I was unemployed, with no prospects. When I heard about the certification program, I enrolled even though I couldn't afford the course. How did you manage it? You offered full scholarships for educators in need. You changed my life. That's wonderful, Chelsea. But there's more. My center in Phoenix has already graduated 500 young people. One of them even earned a scholarship to study in France. That's amazing. Professor Tamika, I want you to know you didn't just change my life. You gave me the tools to change others' lives." These conversations always moved Tamika deeply. Seeing the multiplied impact of her work was the greatest reward she could receive. That night, in her hotel room, Tamika reflected on her journey. 7 years earlier, she had been desperate, cleaning offices to survive. Now, she was internationally recognized as one of the leading educators in the United States. She picked up the phone and called Jasmine, who was in New York City. "Sweetheart, are you awake?" "I am, Mum. How was the conference?" "Incredible. Jasmine, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Do you regret anything about our journey?" "Regret? Why?" "You missed part of your childhood because of my struggles. You went through hardships, heard cruel comments about me." "Mom, stop it. You gave me the most valuable education there is. You taught me to never give up, to believe in myself, to fight for what's right." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Mum, you're my hero. Always have been, always will be." Tamika smiled, her heart warmed by her daughter's words. "Thank you, Jasmine, for always believing in me. Thank you, Mum, for showing me it doesn't matter where we come from, but where we're going." 2 years later, the Educational Centers project celebrated its 7th anniversary. The commemorative ceremony was held at MetLife Stadium, packed with over 60,000 people, students, alumni, teachers, and families. Tamika took the main stage to deliver the opening speech. "Friends," she said, her voice echoing through the stadium. "7 years ago, we were just a dream. Today, we are a reality that has transformed the lives of over 100,000 young Americans." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. "But I want to make one thing clear. This success isn't mine. It's ours. It belongs to every teacher who believed in the project, every student who dedicated themselves to their studies, every family that supported this journey." Jasmine, now 25 and a PhD candidate in international education, also gave a speech. "I grew up watching my mother be humiliated by unfair circumstances, but I also saw her rise, rebuild, and turn her pain into strength to help others. Today, I'm proud to say, I'm the daughter of Tamika Johnson." The crowd spontaneously sang the national anthem in a moment of deep patriotic emotion. Fareed delivered the final speech. "Tamika, you've proven that investments in education are the most valuable ones there are. Not in money, but in transformed lives, renewed hope, and dreams fulfilled." During the event, the upcoming projects were announced: expansion to Latin American countries, the creation of free online courses, and the launch of an educational TV program. After the event, Tamika gave a press conference. "Professor Tamika," asked a journalist, "what is your biggest dream now?" "My biggest dream is that one day projects like ours will be unnecessary. That quality education will be accessible to all young Americans, regardless of their social background." "And if you could go back in time, would you change anything?" Tamika thought for a moment. "I wouldn't change a thing, not even the most painful parts, because every experience, good or bad, brought me to this moment. And this moment is exactly where I need to be." One last question. What advice would you give to someone going through difficulties similar to what you faced? "I'd say adversities are temporary, but the knowledge we gain by overcoming them is permanent. That falls can be painful, but they teach us to cherish every victory, and that it's never too late to start over, as long as we keep alive the hope for better days." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're following us from. If you have something to share, leave us a sincere comment. Do you believe Tamika made the right decisions? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories.